It is always tough when someone so young has endured a lifetime's worth of problems and events. We have seen it a lot of movies, books, and games. However, it is how they deal with these conditions that determine their true personality and conviction, and often has us fans adoring them because of it. It is also these convictions that create some of the strongest villains that have ever been created. It is safe to say that both the main protagonists and antagonists have suffered some form of trauma due to major events that occurred at some point in their lives and have shaped their overall conviction when we come across them in their respective stories. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It has been a very long time, but today we are delving back into the world of Ivalice into one of Final Fantasy XII's central characters. In fact, some may argue that she is the main character of the game over the one that is titled as the main protagonist. We will delve into all of that along with the lore, as we will explore the lore behind Ashelia Banargan Dalmasca from Final Fantasy XII. If you guys enjoy this video and want to see more, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel, and also turn on notifications so you guys are aware of when the lore video is uploaded. Sometimes I will also upload different types of Final Fantasy videos such as facts, news, etc., maybe some gameplay, so I am excited to see where this creativity can take us. I hope you enjoyed today's lore video, and let's begin. Ashe was born as the youngest of 9, as well as the only daughter of King Raminas of the ruling Dalmasca family. It is not known what her childhood was like, but it was unlikely too happy, considering by the time she reached the age of 19 in the events of Final Fantasy XII, her 8 older brothers had already died either due to illness or battle, meaning she became the sole heir to the throne of Dalmasca. As such, she had to learn about the governance of her country at a very young age, and had to be subjected to a political marriage between herself and Lord Rassler, the heir to the throne of Nabradia. Of course, the two had understood this arrangement, yet Ashe was still a little cautious around him because the two had known each other since childhood. Now the next little bit covers a story that is featured in the manga version of Final Fantasy XII, so if you want to hear the full story, you can check out the video that I covered on it. Link will be in the description below. But the idea that Rassler had announced that he could not marry Ashe, which would devastate her, but in reality he was working with Basch to uncover a plot to assassinate King Raminas and ensure that the alliance was done with Rosaria, which is one of the 2 biggest kingdoms in Ivalice, rivaling that of only Arcades, who was planning a mass campaign to expand its influence. The plan was entirely a failure, with Rassler and Ashe getting married in order to seal the alliance between the 2 smaller kingdoms. By this time, Ashe was only 17. Then we entered the events of Final Fantasy XII, where Arcades had launched their assault on Nalbina Fortress. Despite efforts from Rassler and Basch defending the fortress against the massive numbers of the Imperial army, they were forced to surrender, with Rassler being killed and Basch being framed for the murder of King Raminas's death. By this time, we see her as a short woman with a slender build, with sandy blonde hair that is above her shoulders. She's not fully armor, as she has a more agile style of fighting. She has mainly armored heels with white crops and armored knee pads, along with slightly armored shoulder and wrist pads decorated with a white cloth that makes up her clothing, along with a red skirt and a blue belt. She is fiercely independent and determined, as she has pretty much seen everything around her crumble at such a young age, and knows that in order to right the wrongs that have been done to her, she has to push forward and keep fighting, never admitting defeat, even if it is to a fault at times during her journey. Due to Ashe's disappearance, the ruler of Buzurba, Halim Undor IV, announced her death via suicide, thus seemingly leaving Dalmasca without a ruler, and furthermore, allegedly ending the line of King Wraithwall. Ashe meanwhile managed to escape with help from a cell of Dalmascan soldiers led by Vossler, and has worked to sabotage the Empire's efforts ever since, while concealing her identity as the daughter of the late Dalmascan king. However, she could no longer rely on her uncle to gather aid against the Empire, so she formed the resistance that consisted of remnants of those still loyal to Dalmasca and its influence, with many of the group consisting of former Dalmascan soldiers. When Vayne Salador attempted to establish himself as the Consul of Rabanastre following Dalmasca's integration into the Arcadian Empire, the resistance made their move. Led by Ashe and Vossler, they attempted to attack the palace. Vayne had already anticipated this and placed a trap for the resistance, which they fell into. Despite Ashe's determination to fight the soldiers that have swarmed in, Vossler calls for a retreat, and they fall into the waterways, where Ashe is rescued by Vaan, Balthier, and Fran, who also invaded the palace in search of treasure, thus forming an alliance that would eventually become permanent. This is pretty much where Ashe's story gets integrated into the overall story of Final Fantasy X. Driven by her desire to defeat the Empire and reclaim her throne as the heir of King Wraithwall and the rightful ruler of Dalmasca, Ashe goes through trial and tribulation as she reclaims her throne. The journey of Final Fantasy XII in a grander scale pretty much recounts her story of reclaiming the throne of Dalmasca, while toppling the Empire in her path. She was initially driven by vengeance of the death of her family, being the young 19-year-old that she is, but with help from the party members. Of course, with no one left of the royal bloodline to aid her, she pursued her own path, such as claiming the Dusk, the Dawn, and the Midlight Shard, along with the Sword of Kings and the Treaty Blade artifacts as proof of her lineage, while simultaneously being stopped by the Judge Magisters of Arcades to prevent her from claiming her right to the throne, which would effectively seize all Arcadian influence on Dalmasca, to journeying the far reaches of the world into the realm of the gods in Girovegan and the Suncrest at the Spheros Lighthouse, both of which are beyond the reaches of Imperial technology, all in order to provide proof of her lineage as the heir to King Wraithwall. She would even face betrayal from her own comrades as Vossler would turn her into the Empire in exchange for peace in Dalmasca, of course under the influence of the Empire. Along her journey, she would also see apparitions of her late husband, who would often appear at such opportune times. But of course, we learn later on that this was nothing more than an illusion from the Ocuria in order to keep Ashe on the path that they wanted her to go to, something she ultimately defies and sticks with her own convictions. After leading the resistance against the Empire in a decisive war above Rabanastre, and Vayne's defeat in her and her companion's hands, Ashe calls for a ceasefire and a truce between the Resistance and the Empire, and eventually becomes Queen of Dalmasca, thus fulfilling her destiny despite going against the wishes of those who wish to install her as the Dynast King of Ivalice, ushering in a new era of peace. So there's been this debate among Final Fantasy XII fans that Ashe is actually the main character of the story, instead of the designated main character, which is Vaan. And I believe that there is a strong case for this. Despite each character having their own angles and stories, Ashe's story has been the biggest scale of impact on the entire game. Here's what I'm talking about. Basch is in the party because he is avenging his name and restoring the status of Dalmasca. And in order to do that, he needs to support Ashe on her quest. Vaan is there because he wants to avenge Rex, who died in the service of Dalmasca against the Empire, and thus would need to support Ashe. Balthier and Fran are there because they are sky pirates and are always in pursuit of treasure. None better to find any than being accompanied by royalty. And of course, Penelo was there because of Vaan. Ashe, on the other hand, is mainly following her own conviction and destiny, as how she developed her personality because of her circumstances growing up, thus making her one of the strongest and most independent main characters in Final Fantasy, if not gaming lore. There are others who fit this bill as well, but it is always interesting to delve into someone's lore and determine why they got to where they were by the time that we come across them in the games. And that about does it for the lore behind the Lady Ashe. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and comment on what other lore videos you would like me to cover. Also consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more Final Fantasy content. Other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and I will see you all again soon.